Hi, everyone. I just want to quickly go over this slideshow on narrative arguments. Much of it is written, so you can always read through that as well. But basically, I just want to let you know the reason that we're going to be doing a narrative for our first project is because these are a very important type of argument. One, because they're considered the most persuasive type of argument. And two, because they are popping up more and more in different types of content that we're seeing at colleges, right? And so this is a very common first assignment. There's also places that you'll see it, such as a college admissions essay. You might even see it for something related to a job. And so you want to just make sure, like, if nothing else than an interview. So you just want to make sure that this is a type of argument that you feel comfortable with and that you feel like you know what is expected. There's lots of different mediums of narrative. And so here, of course, we're focusing a little bit more on the prose, the essay version of this, but there's also going to be personal narratives or narrative arguments in song. We have oral storytelling, videos, podcasts, and lots of other different types. Okay, even video games, for example. Okay, so how does a narrative persuade someone? The key here is that we're trying to create an experience and help them imagine, our reader or audience, imagine what it is that we went through so that whenever they can then imagine that experience, it leads them to accept the same conclusions that we did. They're not necessarily going to agree with us. They might not even accept our argument at all, but they're now going to have a better understanding of where we're coming from, okay? And so that's something that's important to consider with arguments, is that we're not necessarily trying to change the way somebody thinks or acts, but we are always trying to at the very least, help them better understand our argument, okay? All right, so there's this rule that people say a lot, which is show, don't tell. And it's a cliche for a reason. It works. And so basically what you want to do is you want to make sure you're giving us enough detail that we can imagine your experience, right? Because that's a very important part of making sure that the argument succeeds. And so you don't have to do a lot of flowery language. You don't have to even go on and on and on about what a room or person looks like or whatever. But you want to make sure that you're focusing on key things so that we know what to focus on, so that we know what it felt like or what it seemed like or what they looked like or who's there or something like that, okay? So some keys for doing this. One is to write dialogue. A lot of people are really hesitant to write dialogue because they're like, well, I can't really remember. But the thing is, if you're using dialogue, it's going to make it a lot easier for us to imagine what a person is like, okay? And so this is really crucial with things like if you're thinking about like TV shows and stuff. Sometimes we learn so much about a character just from the way that they talk, even sometimes more than what they're saying. But this also helps us learn what a person's motivation is. And so if you can't really remember exactly what someone said, let's say it's your mom, then you kind of know what your mom talks like though, right? So you can kind of estimate and just do your best in terms of what you remember her saying. This is going to be through your lens. It's not objective. The whole point is that this is a subjective experience that you're sharing with us. And so we kind of know to take it with a grain of salt that this is your experience more than it is a perfectly accurate portrayal of what happened. Make sure that you're describing the people in your story. This is something that people often forget to do, but the more familiar someone is to you, the more likely you are to forget to talk about what they look like or what they sound like or what they move like or things like that. Okay, so just make sure that you're describing them. And then the last thing is just to use specific detail. Be as specific as you can to help us imagine something. And so if you say she had brown hair, that is not necessarily as helpful as if you say she had brown curly hair. And what might be even more helpful than that is to say she had long brown curly hair. Now I'm getting more of a picture, right? And so the more detail that you give us, the more specific you can be with that detail, the better. Okay, so do you need a thesis statement for this paper? No, but sometimes people do want to include them. And that's because if you have a thesis statement, you can be sure that your argument is coming through. And so if you're a little bit worried, you're like, I don't know if people know what my argument is, go ahead and add a thesis statement. You don't have to have like a super direct argument in your paper, but there does need to be an argument in order to get a good grade on the paper. And just in general, for a narrative argument to succeed, it should be clear that it is making some sort of argument or has a certain theme at least. And so if this is something that you're concerned about, go ahead and, address that in peer review or when you're talking to me about your draft. But this is something that is good to consider. And then finally, I would just say that a lot of times we think of narratives when we're trying to think of a good topic, we think of like the biggest things that have ever happened to us when we had a child, or, you know, when we lost someone important to us, or when we got married, or when we went through a terrible breakup. You know, it's like these kind of big, important moments, traumatic, joyful. But I want to just encourage you to think a little bit about more mundane things as well. And we can see this with Hanif Abdurraqib's story about sneakers. That story is actually kind of profound and deep, but it's about sneakers at first, right? And so I think that if you look around yourself and you're thinking, I don't really know what to write about, you could hypothetically choose to write about maybe an object. Why do I have so many sneakers? Or, you know, where did this love of sneakers come from? For example, could be a good way of coming up with a topic. And then I have a few prompts on the next page, just in case you're still kind of thinking about what you want to write about for your paper. That's it for this one. I just wanted to go ahead and go over these slides just to kind of give you a little bit more information on what might be helpful when you're starting to write your paper.